36 years. That's how long Pete Mitchell has been a captain. Not because the Navy didn't offer him admiral. They did, multiple times. He turned it down every single chance he had. Not out of laziness, not out of spite, but because admirals sit behind a desk. Admirals don't fly. And if Pete Mitchell doesn't fly, he doesn't exist. So he keeps showing up to the same cockpit, at the same rank, wearing the same jacket, living in a hangar, sleeping alone. He's the best at what he does, and he's chosen deliberately, repeatedly, to stay exactly where he is. Maybe you're not a fighter pilot, but you know what it is to keep choosing the thing that keeps you from having to move forward. Pete Mitchell isn't a reckless man who got lucky. He's one of the most skilled aviators the Navy's ever produced, a man with the kind of instinctive genius that borders on physical law, like he and the aircraft exist inside the same nervous system. The legend is real, but the legend is also a hiding place. Across 2 films and 3 decades of story, what you notice isn't the danger Maverick puts himself into. It's what the danger keeps him from having to face. The cockpit is where Maverick is completely in control. Everything else, grief, intimacy, time, the fact that the people he loves get older while he finds a way to stay frozen, that's the territory he can't navigate without an aircraft under him. The call sign stopped being ironic a long time ago. It became a personality, and personalities built on motion are very good at disguising the things they're running from. There's a moment near the beginning of Top Gun Maverick that tells you almost everything you need to know. A 4-star general has just shown up to shut down Maverick's test program and ground him permanently. And Maverick's response is to get in the plane anyway. He hits Mach 10, nearly dies, sets a record, and gets himself fired, all within the same hour. That's not the behavior of someone who doesn't care. That's the behavior of someone who will risk death before they'll sit still. In the air, there's no past. There's no future beyond the next 10 seconds. The math of survival is so demanding, so total, that nothing else can fit inside it. You can't grieve at Mach 10. You can't wonder whether you've made the wrong choices for your whole adult life when you're pulling 9 Gs through a canyon at 200 feet. The speed isn't the point. The obliteration of everything else is the point. Psychologists studying avoidance coping, the pattern of using activity, intensity, or focus to escape emotional processing, have found it to be one of the most seductive and self-sustaining forms of defense we have. Because unlike denial, which requires you to pretend things are fine, avoidance coping actually works. It genuinely makes you feel better. The pain goes away when you're moving fast enough. The problem is that the pain is still there when you land. And so you take off again. Think about the things you stay busy with, not because the busyness is meaningless, it usually isn't, but because the alternative is a quiet room with nothing to do but notice what you've been outrunning. Maverick just happens to outrun at the speed of sound. Most of us do it at a much more ordinary pace. The mechanism, though, is the same. Nick Bradshaw has been dead for decades, and Maverick has never left the scene of the accident. The way survivor guilt works, and Maverick is a textbook case, is that it doesn't just make you feel bad about the person who died. It rewrites the entire sense of what you're allowed to have. Happiness starts to feel like a betrayal. Progress feels like abandonment. Getting promoted, moving on, building a life, all of it accumulates into a kind of debt to the dead that can never be fully paid. So you just stop trying to pay it. You keep living in the red. When Maverick makes a promise to Goose's dying wife that he'll keep their son out of naval aviation, he's not being protective. He's being punishing. Of himself, mostly. He's keeping himself locked inside the moment the canopy shattered, because leaving that moment would mean accepting that Goose is gone and that life, his life, gets to continue anyway. The guilt isn't a feeling Maverick carries, it's a structure he lives inside. Psychologist Kenneth Doka, who spent decades studying grief, identified a concept he called disenfranchised grief, loss that doesn't get publicly acknowledged, that a person is expected to recover from without ceremony. Maverick was cleared of responsibility. The Navy said it wasn't his fault, and so the grief had nowhere official to go. It went underground instead, and it shaped everything. You may not have lost someone the way Maverick lost Goose, but you probably know the specific weight of guilt you decided you deserved and then kept carrying long after any fair accounting would have put it down. Guilt is strange that way. It can start as grief and harden into identity. Maverick isn't guilty anymore in any meaningful sense. He's just become someone who carries guilt because he doesn't know who he is without it. Here's the cruel irony of Pete Mitchell's life. The thing that saved him also trapped him. His genius in the air is real, not performed, not compensatory, genuinely extraordinary. But that genius became the currency he uses for everything that emotional life demands. Someone needs something from him, he'll fly the mission himself. Someone is in danger, he'll get in the aircraft. Someone needs him to stay, to be present, to let the future arrive. He'll find a way to be somewhere in the sky anyway. This is what psychologists sometimes call competence as avoidance, when a real and legitimate skill becomes the mechanism by which a person sidesteps the growth they haven't done. It's particularly common in people who found one thing that they're extraordinary at early in life, something that gave them identity and belonging and safety, something that worked when nothing else did. The skill is genuine. What it's being used for is the problem. Maverick's a man who is over 50 years old and lives in a converted hangar, has never married, has essentially no fixed address, and keeps one relationship genuinely close. A woman he cycles back to but can never quite stay with. Penny knows his first name. She calls him Pete, not Maverick. And watch what he does whenever the conversation gets to a depth that the call sign can't protect him from. He deflects. He's charming. He leaves. The version of himself that's exceptional, that belongs in the sky, that everyone needs, that can't be replaced or grounded or aged out, that version he has maintained with extraordinary discipline for 30 years. The version that's just a person with a father who died in a war and best friend he couldn't save and a son he kept out of his own profession out of love disguised as punishment, that version he's kept at a very careful altitude. High enough that no one can quite reach him, just close enough that he doesn't have to admit he's alone. A man who stays in motion so he doesn't have to land anywhere, who carries guilt the way other people carry a name tag because it's the one thing that confirms he was there when it mattered, who uses the one thing he's truly exceptional at to avoid becoming anything more complicated than exceptional. You're more like Maverick than you realize, not because you fly jets, because you know what it is to build your whole life around the speed of something, a job, a role, a version of yourself that's easier than the unguarded one, and call it living when really it's a very sophisticated form of hovering. The sky for Maverick is honest. It asks everything he has, and it gives him back exactly what he earns. The ground is where he doesn't know the rules. The ground is where Goose isn't coming back, and his father died, and time moves in only one direction, and being extraordinary doesn't protect you from any of it. That's not a character flaw. That's a wound that learned to fly. The question isn't whether you have one of those. Most of us do. The question is whether you've let it become the reason you never come down. Thanks for watching this video. If you'd like me to give this same treatment to one of your favorite characters in film or books, television, leave it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, then be sure to check out this one about Tommy Norris from Landman.